All right, you sick fucks. We're diving headfirst into a real shitstorm today. The Reichstag Fire, 1933. Germany's about as stable as a goddamn meth head on payday Weimar Republic, hanging on by a thread, and those Nazis and communists are at each other's throats, ready to tear the whole fucking country apart. You get your research, your articles, whatever the hell you dug up. So let's crack this fucker open and see what kind of twisted shit we can find.
Yeah, strap yourselves in, folks. Because this is where history takes a seriously dark turn. After World War I, Germany's like a pressure cooker ready to blow the Weimar Republic, their attempt at democracy, about as useful as a screen door on a submarine.
And to make things worse, they decide to make Hitler chancellor. Brilliant fucking move. Stein.
Yeah, not their brightest idea. The Nazis were already a major pain in the ass, but they were far from running the whole show, Hitler's appointment. It was like those conservative politicians thought they could use him as a puppet. You know, pull the strings and make him dance.
That plan blew up in their faces, didn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, spectacularly. The Nazis were playing the long game, man. They saw this as their chance to worm their way into the government. They were just waiting for the right moment to strike.
And that moment came when the Reichstag went up in flames. What a fucking coincidence.
The timing was convenient for the Nazis, to say the least. February 27th, 1933, just a few weeks after Hitler becomes chancellor, the Reichstag, building the symbol of German democracy, up in smoke.
And then they find this Dutch dude, Marinus van der Lubbe, wandering around the burning building, a communist with a history of arson.
Van der Lubbe was a member of the Council Communists, a bunch of radical leftists who believed in taking direct action against the capitalist system.
Sounds like the perfect fall guy. Did he even confess?
Oh, he was caught red-handed at the scene. Admitted to starting the fire, said he was acting alone, motivated by his hatred of capitalism and the rise of fascism in Germany.
Bullshit. Of course, the Nazis jumped all over that, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. They saw this as their golden ticket to crush the opposition and grab even more power. Hitler immediately blamed the communists, claimed it was the start of a Bolshevik uprising.
Classic Nazi tactic. Create a crisis, then swoop in and save the day.
They were masters of manipulation. Hitler used the fire as an excuse to issue the Reichstag Fire decree. It basically suspended civil liberties and gave the government the power to arrest and detain anyone they considered a threat.
So much for freedom of speech.
It was the beginning of the end for the Weimar Republic, even though it officially limped on for a few more months. The Nazis used this decree to arrest thousands of communists, social democrats, anyone who opposed them. They shut down newspapers, banned public meetings. It was a full-blown reign of terror.
And they did it all legally.
Well, legally, according to their own twisted definition of the law, the Reichstag Fire decree was technically legal, but it was clearly designed to give the Nazis dictatorial powers. They could bypass the Constitution and rule by decree.
So with the communists out of the picture, the Nazis could focus on their next target, the upcoming elections.
The fire had a huge impact on the elections just a few weeks later. The Nazis, despite all the violence and intimidation, they still didn't win a majority. But they came close. And with the help of a few right-wing allies, they were able to form a government.
But they weren't satisfied with just a measly majority, were they?
No, they wanted absolute power. And they used their newfound control of the government to get it. A few weeks after the election, they introduced the Enabling Act, which basically handed Hitler the keys to the kingdom.
The Enabling Act. What a cute name for a law that destroyed German democracy.
It's a perfect example of how to legally dismantle a democracy from the inside out. The Enabling Act gave Hitler the power to make laws without the approval of the Reichstag. He was a dictator in all but name.
So there you have it, folks. In just a few short months, the Nazis went from a fringe political party to the undisputed rulers of Germany. And it all started with a fire. Convenient, isn't it?
The Reichstag Fire was a turning point in German history. It was the event that allowed the Nazis to seize power and unleash their reign of terror.
But let's not forget about the poor bastard they used as their scapegoat. They put van der Lubbe on trial, right?
The trial of Marinus van der Lubbe was a complete joke. The Nazis wanted to use it to demonize the communists and justify their crackdown.
And to make it even more theatrical, they held the trial in the burnt-out shell of the Reichstag building. Talk about rubbing it in.
It was pure propaganda. A show trial designed to showcase the threat of communism and the Nazis' heroic actions.
So they dragged van der Lubbe and a few communists into this kangaroo court. And one of those communists, a Bulgarian guy named Georgy Dimitrov, actually decided to fight back.
Dimitrov was a seasoned communist leader and a damn good speaker. He refused to be intimidated by the Nazis, and he used the trial as a platform to call them out.
He even went head-to-head with Hermann Goering, Hitler's right-hand man. That must have been a sight to see.
Goering, who was presiding over the trial, was pissed at Dimitrov's defiance. They had some heated exchanges, a lot of shouting matches.
I bet Goering was seeing red crew. Dimitrov was basically calling him a lying sack of shit in front of the world.
Dimitrov's performance at the trial was remarkable. He poked holes in the prosecution's case and presented a compelling counter-narrative that challenged the Nazis' version of events.
So what happened? Did they just hang van der Lubbe and call it a day?
Van der Lubbe was found guilty and sentenced to death. He was beheaded in January 1934.
What a fucked up end for the patsy. But what about Dimitrov and the other communists? Did they get off scot-free?
The other communists got off. They didn't have enough evidence to convict them. Dimitrov's performance at the trial definitely helped sway public opinion. The Nazis were worried about looking bad on the international stage if they convicted him.
So they let him walk. That doesn't sound very Nazi-like.
Well, they weren't complete morons. They knew they couldn't just silence everyone. Sometimes it's better to pretend you're being fair even when you're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, those sneaky bastards. So what happened to Dimitrov after he got out? Did he go into hiding or something?
He knew Germany wasn't safe anymore. He was allowed to leave and went to the Soviet Union. Became a bit of a celebrity there, for standing up to the Nazis.
From Nazi prisoner to communist hero. What a fucking story.
It just shows you that even when things are really fucked up, there are always people willing to fight for what they believe in, even when the odds are stacked against them.
All right, enough of that touchy-feely crap. Let's get back to the fire itself. Was it really just this van der Lubbe guy acting alone, or were the Nazis pulling the strings behind the scenes?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's been a lot of debate about it over the years. Some historians think van der Lubbe was a lone wolf, a mentally unstable guy who just wanted to lash out at the system.
But come on, the whole thing reeks of a setup.
Yeah.
The Nazis benefited way too much from it.
Yeah, the timing was just too perfect. And the way they responded so quickly and decisively, it's hard not to be suspicious.
So what's the evidence? Did they find Hitler's fingerprints on a gasoline can?
There's no smoking gun, but there are definitely some weird clues and inconsistencies that point towards a Nazi conspiracy.
All right, I'm listening. What kind of clues are we talking about?
Well, for one thing, the fire spread way too fast for a fire, started by one guy with a few rags and some kindling.
Maybe they used some kind of accelerant, like gasoline.
Possibly. And there were reports of multiple fires breaking out at the same time in different parts of the building.
Yeah.
Pretty hard for one guy to pull that off.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. What else?
There's the testimony of Hans Martin Lennings, an SA member who claimed he was part of a group that brought van der Lubbe to the Reichstag that night.
Wait, the SA? Those were like Hitler's goons, right?
Yeah. Basically, Hitler's personal thugs. Lennings said that the Reichstag was already on fire when they got there with van der Lubbe. He even said they protested at the time, saying van der Lubbe couldn't have started the fire. It was already blazing when we got here.
Holy shit. So they were basically delivering the patsy to a crime scene that was already in progress.
That's what Lennings claimed in a sworn affidavit he signed in 1955. He said they were ordered to take van der Lubbe at the Reichstag and leave him there to be found.
Sounds like a classic frame-up. But why would Lennings wait so long to tell his story? Was he afraid of Nazi ghosts or something?
He was afraid of retribution from former Nazis who were still around in post-war Germany. He kept his mouth shut for years, but eventually he felt like he had to tell the truth.
Well, better late than never, I guess. But what did the Nazis say about all this? Did they just roll over and admit defeat?
Of course not. They denied everything. Said Lennings was lying and his affidavit was fake news.
Shocker. Liar's gonna lie. But Lennings' story isn't the only weird thing about this whole mess, is it?
Nope. There's also the case of Hermann Goering allegedly bragging about setting the fire himself at a party years later.
Goering, that fat fuck with all the medals.
The one and only. Apparently he was known for getting drunk and running his mouth.
So he gets hammered and starts spilling state secrets.
Typical.
Several people claim to have heard him boasting about his role in the fire. Of course, there's no way to verify it, and Goering never admitted to anything publicly. Yeah, but it makes you think, doesn't it? Was he just drunk and talking shit? Or was there some truth to what he was saying?
It's impossible to know for sure, but it's definitely a juicy little detail that adds to the mystery.
So we've got a suspicious fire, a patsy with a history of arson, a Nazi thug claiming it was a setup, and Goering drunkenly confessing. It's like a really fucked up episode of Scooby-Doo.
The Reichstag Fire was a tragedy that changed the course of history. It shows how a political party can exploit a crisis to seize power, and how propaganda and manipulation can be used to control the narrative.
So what's the verdict? Was it an inside job or just a random act of pyromania?
It's impossible to say for sure, but the evidence definitely suggests that the Nazis were involved in some way. Whether they planned the fire or just took advantage of the situation is still up for debate.
So it's a big fat maybe. That's not very satisfying.
History is rarely black and white. There are always unanswered questions, conflicting accounts, hidden agendas. The Reichstag fire is a perfect example of that.
All right, fine. Let's move on to the aftermath of the fire. The Nazis used it as an excuse to crack down on the communists, right?
Absolutely. The fire gave them the perfect excuse to launch a full-on attack against their political opponents. They used the Reichstag Fire decree to arrest thousands of people. Communists, social democrats, anyone they considered an enemy of the state. They shut down newspapers, banned political parties. It was a total clampdown.
So basically a dictatorship. Did anyone even try to stop them?
There were a few voices of dissent, but they were quickly silenced. The Nazis were ruthless and efficient. They controlled the media, the police, the military. Anyone who spoke out was risking their life.
So it was game over for democracy in Germany.
The Reichstag fire was the turning point. It marked the beginning of the end for the Weimar Republic and the rise of the Nazi dictatorship.
Okay, but what about the rest of the world? Did they just sit back and watch Germany go to hell?
There was a lot of concern and condemnation from other countries, but most of them were hesitant to intervene. They had their own problems to deal with, and a lot of them were still struggling with the Great Depression.
So they just turned a blind eye while Hitler built his fascist empire.
Nice. There is this naive hope that they could appease Hitler, reason with him and prevent another war.
Well, that worked out great, didn't it?
Appeasement rarely works. It just makes dictators bolder and gives them more time to prepare for their next conquest.
So the world basically handed Hitler a blank check to do whatever he wanted. What a bunch of idiots.
Hindsight is 20/20. It's easy to judge the decisions made in the past based on what we know now, but at the time they were operating in a very different context.
Yeah, they were trying to avoid another war, but they ended up getting one anyway, and it was even worse than the last one.
The consequences of inaction can be just as devastating as the consequences of bad decisions.
Okay, let's talk about that trial again. This Dimitrov guy, he really got under Goering's skin, didn't he?
Dimitrov was a real pain in the ass for the Nazis. He refused to be intimidated, and he used the trial to expose their lies and hypocrisy.
He must have had balls of steel. I bet Hitler wanted to rip his head off.
Dimitrov's defiance was a rare act of courage in a time when everyone was terrified.
So what happened to him after he left Germany? Did he ride off into the sunset?
He went to the Soviet Union and became a big shot in the Communist International.
So he traded one totalitarian regime for another. Not exactly a fairy tale ending.
It just shows you that the fight for freedom and justice is never easy. And even those who fight on the right side can make mistakes and end up on the wrong side of history.
Deep, man. Deep. But let's get back to the Reichstag fire itself. What happened to the building after it was torched?
It was pretty badly damaged, but the Nazis decided to keep the ruins as a symbol of their victory over their enemies.
So they turned it into a Nazi tourist attraction.
Yeah.
Come see where we burned down democracy.
They used it for propaganda, held rallies and exhibitions there. They even built a platform so Hitler could give speeches from the burnt-out shell of the building.
Talk about rubbing it in. But what happened to the Reichstag after the war? Did they just tear it down and pretend it never existed?
After the Nazis were defeated, the Reichstag building remained a ruin for a long time. It was a powerful symbol of the destruction and division that had ripped Germany apart.
So it's like this giant reminder of the bad old days. Did they ever rebuild it?
Yeah, there was a lot of debate about what to do with it. Some people wanted to just demolish it, wipe it off the map. Others thought it should be preserved as a memorial to the victims of the Nazis.
So basically a giant fuck you to the Nazis.
Kind of. But in the end, they decided to rebuild it, but not just rebuild it. They wanted to transform it into a symbol of a new democratic Germany.
So they took this Nazi-infested building and turned it into a beacon of democracy. Talk about a glow-up.
It was a pretty bold move. The architect's Norman Foster. He designed this amazing glass dome that sits on top of the building. It's supposed to represent transparency and openness, the opposite of everything the Nazis stood for.
So they literally brought light into the darkness.
That's pretty poetic. Yeah, it's a powerful symbol. The dome also gives you this incredible view of the city, symbolizing a government that's accountable to the people. Visitors can even walk up a ramp inside the dome, get a unique perspective on how Parliament works.
From a symbol of Nazi power to a symbol of democracy? What a crazy transformation.
It shows you how resilient people can be. Even from the ashes of destruction, something beautiful can grow.
That's actually pretty heartwarming. But let's get back to the real shit. What if the Reichstag fire never happened? Would the Nazis still have taken over?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's impossible to say for sure. But Germany was a mess back then. The economy was in the toilet. political instability everywhere. People were pissed off and desperate for change.
So you're saying Germany was like a ticking time bomb just waiting to explode?
Exactly. And the Nazis were experts at exploiting people's anger and fear. They promised to make Germany great again, restore national pride, solve all their problems.
And people actually believed that shit.
A lot of them did. They were desperate. They wanted someone to lead them out of the darkness. And the Nazis gave them someone to blame, a sense of belonging, and a vision of a better future.
Sounds pretty familiar. Demagogues always use the same tactics. Blame the outsiders, make big promises, and stir up fear and resentment.
It's a classic formula for manipulating people, and it still works today.
That's a scary thought. But what about the Reichstag Fire itself? What are the big takeaways from this whole clusterfuck?
I think the Reichstag Fire shows us that even in a democracy, our freedoms are fragile and can be easily exploited. It also shows how powerful propaganda can be and how important it is to think critically. We can't just believe everything we're told. We have to question things and stand up for our rights.
So don't be a sheep. Think for yourself.
Exactly. Do your own research, question the official story, and be wary of anyone who benefits from chaos and division.
Good advice. All right, you degenerates, that's our deep dive into the Reichstag Fire. We dug through the historical shit, waded through the bullshit, and hopefully learned a thing or two. And if not, at least we had some fun ranting about Nazis. So until next time, stay sharp, keep your bullshit detectors on high, and don't let the bastards get you down.